Welcome back. All throughout high school, everybody tells you that once you matriculate, you'll be in the big world, or the real world, as it were. But no one actually tells you what to expect. Now, education specialists like Dr. David Makovah have emphasized on the importance of also being on the lookout for new opportunities that are available. He suggests that maybe learners can look at tapping into the new normal digital world to gain some new skills. Dr. David Makovah joins us now this morning to share a few pro tips on life after matric and what you can actually look forward to. Dr. Makovah, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Simpiwe. Thank you, listeners. Fantastic to be here.
And it's good to have you on the show this morning, Dr. Makovah. You emphasize for students to be on the lookout for new opportunities that are available. Please do share more details on that.
So, Simpiwe, the state of our economy, the way the world is evolving is that a lot of these students who finish matric won't be able to get a formal job qualification. But there's still significant opportunities within the marketplace. So people have been speaking about the gig economy for a long time now. And the gig economy, particularly with regards to digital services, is offering massive opportunities for matriculants who can build their own skills independently by learning online. But they've now got the capacity to sell those skills both in South Africa and in the rest of the world if they can demonstrate that they're effective at what they do. And those are some of the opportunities I talk about, is that matriculants don't wait to get a job, but they're proactive, and to some degree they start creating their own jobs and really start determining their own future.
Now, Dr. Makovah, we've heard stories of matric students put under pressure by parents to study something that they're not passionate about. So how do you educate parents more on these digital opportunities?
I had the same problem. So growing up, I thought I wanted to be an actor. But generationally, my dad said, no way. I ended up being a chartered accountant in that regard. So you've got to convince your parents, and you've got to understand that generationally, there are things that are understandable they've got reservations about. Now, my dad was a peasant when he started off, so for him, me going for acting would have been a luxury. I'm sure some of our matriculants need to do something very, very similar in terms of the convincing. But when you have a discussion with your parents, it's not about doing digital skills, it's not about doing acting or any other career in that respect. What you've got to demonstrate to your parents is whatever you choose, one, you're going to be the hardest working person within that particular arena. Here we're talking about digital skills. So you're going to be working hard. And two, if you press on and you push at it, it will allow you to become independent, both financially and just generally in terms of your life. It will lead you to become a responsible citizen who's making a contribution both to society and to their family. Those are the main things. Absolutely, they don't have as much exposure to the digital opportunities. That's normal generationally. But you've got to demonstrate you're the hardest working person in that regard.
Right.
You're going to deliver, and it's actually going to result in you becoming independent. So the top guys, they had skepticism from their parents. Michael Dell, he built Dell computers. His parents wanted him to do something else. But with hard work, with dedication, with ultimately delivering on going into the space, he convinced his parents.
And with the world fast changing and adapting to the digital world, where are we as South Africans? I mean, what more needs to be done to highlight online opportunities that we should embrace?
So in South Africa, in the education space, we've got a two-tier system. We've probably got 10%, at the most 15% of primary and secondary schools which have actually managed to adapt quite readily with regards to the opportunities of digital education. And what the COVID pandemic did is it accelerated that, in part, simply by way of sheer necessity. So 10% of our population has actually been able to adjust pretty well with regards to that. And obviously, those are probably the more affluent schools, the more urban schools, the schools which have got access to greater resources. The 90 to 85% I mentioned is significantly behind. We've lost an incredible amount of time in terms of lost hours. We weren't set up for the digital delivery of education. There were infrastructure challenges, access to Wi-Fi, etc., and so forth. So in 2022, we've got two challenges. One, with that 85 to 90%, we need to catch up on the lost time. And we really need to start accelerating and amplifying the work that was done from 2020 onwards with regards to embedding digital delivery of education services. So the gaps in terms of the quality of our education are really narrowed down quite significantly. So it's two-tier. The wealthy are pretty well off, and they definitely are world-class in some respects. But then the bulk of our learners don't have access to those resources, and we've got quite a bit of catching up to do.
How then do we shift the mindset of people to understand the benefits of digital world?
I'm not so concerned about the younger people, because the younger people actually get it.
Right.
The younger people, if you give them access to resources, if you give them access to the internet, if you allow them to access some free content on their phones every single day, they get it. That's why we built our online learning platform, Mr. Mac Learning, and it's young people are using it. So with young people, what we've got to be focused on is actually giving them access to those resources. And what you find is they go onto YouTube and they go onto these online learning platforms like Mr. Mac Learning, or what we're now calling massive open online platforms, things like Udacity, things like Coursera. The young people are doing it. What's incumbent upon our generation, what's incumbent upon parents, government, other stakeholders, is to actually give them access to these opportunities and at the same time communicate that these are available to them at price points that are accessible.
How do we incorporate everything into this industry, which to so many in the rural and the far-flung areas is still not accessible at this point?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Simpiwe. So you mentioned rural areas, for example. And when people think digital, they're often thinking rocket science, computers, Amazon Web Services, cloud computing, blah, blah, fish paste. But digitalization actually speaks to these digital capabilities in a whole host of spheres. So if someone is a farmer, there's a whole universe in the digital space where they can actually extract a great deal of benefit, learn how to farm better, improve their farming methods, increase their yield, their productivity, generate a lot more money. So this cuts across all sectors. Digitalization is not just a sexy thing for urban areas and for people to do social media. Your typical person, farmer Sipho in the Eastern Cape in a rural setting, someone with kids there, they can access this content and they can really use it to benefit their lives, improve their livelihoods, and actually generate a lot of money. So it cuts across all sectors. And that's a compelling opportunity we're trying to communicate and to drive. Regardless of the sector you're in, regardless of where you are in the country and the continent, these capabilities can improve your life.
Now, Dr. Makovah, matric results are coming out next week. Any advice to the learners?
I've actually written an article on this because we're going to have our usual argy-bargy between the custodians of the results, the Department of Basic Education, and obviously the parents and other stakeholders. But my advice to learners is, regardless of what the results are, if you've done well, fantastic, build on that. Hopefully you can get a great job, a great opportunity, start your own business. If you haven't done well, it's not the end of the world. The measure of the man or the woman you are will be in your capability to pick yourself up. But my advice is try and get working skills.
Right.
And that might mean initially you need to sweep the floor and you have to swallow your pride. But when you get work skills, when you get work experience, you can actually teleport those skills, sweeping the floor, to becoming managing director of a huge listed business. And I'm telling that story not from a theoretical point of view. That was my father. He started off digging sewage trenches. He started off sweeping the shop floors at Edgar's, but he became the managing director. So you've got to get yourself working, as humble as it is, or as it may be, because that's going to start building your skills and taking you somewhere. Even if you have to offer to work for free, start working, start doing something. don't be sitting at home if you haven't got a job opportunity waiting for you straight away.
And I suppose teacher training is very vital for the success of digital transformation. So are our teachers or educators better prepared to adapt to this phenomenon?
Yeah, it comes to that two-tier system I spoke to about earlier on, Simpiwe. 10 to 15% of our students do have access to teachers who are highly digitally savvy. They're almost digital natives, so to speak. But the overwhelming majority of our students don't. We have teachers, unfortunately, just due to circumstances, often not their own fault, who've never used an iPad, who've never used YouTube. And these are the channels we're trying to direct students to. So a big part of our responsibility as a nation will be in upskilling those teachers, because if we don't get it right with the teachers themselves, it's very, very difficult to allow them to be a conduit to getting it right with the underlying learners. So two-tier system in that regard. We've got an incredible amount of work to do, both with our teachers and with our students.
So how do we get started? How does our education system get started in terms of adapting to digital transformation? Does it have to do with a complete overhaul of the education system, or certain tweaks here and there need to be implemented?
So if we say a complete overhaul, we're not going to start till 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when we think the overhaul has actually been completed. I would say we start with the little that we have. We start with what's within our hands. And I'll give you some examples of some schools I've been interacting with who've done really great work. So we've got some proactive teachers at these schools, and these are public schools. And what they've done is they've entered into collaborations with some of the telecommunications providers, and they've said, we would like our students to be able to access this digital content, but would like you folks to be able to zero rate it. Effectively, that means the learners don't pay for the data. And in those agreements, it's meant that those learners who don't have cell phones, who don't have tablets like maybe some of our kids do, but when they're at school, and they've got access to some of this hardware, they can access some of these educational and learning technologies at school, and the impediment is not an access to data or the price points relating to data. So those schools have started where they're at. And when they've started and they've begun showing progress, they've actually been able to attract sponsors, either in the form of parents, in the form of other companies, or in the form of non-profit organizations. So we've got to start with the little that we have. And I'd really encourage schools and other organizations to start there with the little that they have. Don't wait for there to be an entire overhaul of the education system. And where we want to be, let's say 18 months from now, 24 months from now, 36 months from now, is where every single school has got access to the basic physical infrastructure that allows students and teachers to access these digital capabilities, but also the soft infrastructure where the teachers can teach, they can enable, they can really provide a forum whereby these learners can explore and develop and grow these skills on their own.
Do you get a sense then that this digital transformation that we so fervently pushing will gear students and learners to be self-sustainable or self-employed in the future? Or is it, bearing the same hallmarks as the current incumbent education system that we've grown accustomed to in terms of, gearing students to be employed?
Yeah, so it's very, very different. It's a very, very different skill set, and it's a very, very different mindset that's required in the digital realm. So I'm going to approach it slightly differently. You still need basic skills. You still need to be able to read. You still need to be able to write. You still need important life skills. Can I talk to people politely? Am I getting to work on time? Do I dress appropriately? Because I'm not Mark Zuckerberg. You still need those particular skills. But what the digital opportunity does for younger people is you've now got the potential to empower yourself. Literally, I work with companies where the people started from scratch. They had no formal background in programming. I'm using that as a simple thing. But they taught themselves online. They experimented online. They built things. They started building tools online. And now they're running these massive businesses and organizations. So what digitalization does, what digital skills do, is they actually democratize to a certain degree the learning process. And if you're disciplined, if you are driven, if you're able to focus and apply your minds to improving your skill set and then deploying that in the marketplace and facing the marketplace, you're going to fail at times, you're going to succeed. It democratizes those opportunities because now they're not just available to a small percentage, 5% of people. Now they're available to you if you've got basic access to these capabilities, but you're also prepared to work hard, to be disciplined, and to execute. And then in that respect, the sky's the limit because you can sell those capabilities, not just in South Africa, you can sell them in Kenya, you can sell them in Nigeria, you can sell them in the UK and earn pounds, in Europe and earn euros, in the United States and earn dollars. It allows you as a citizen to globalize yourself, to globalize your skills, and to globalize your business.
And should, God forbid, we see a level of, inadequate level of trust in the digital transformation process, how do we deal with that? How do we ensure that everybody, is on board, be it the learners and the teachers, is on board in terms of embracing and adapting to this digital transformation?
Yeah. So there are two things you touched on, Simpiwe. There's inequality and there's trust. The inequality piece is very, very important. It's absolutely critical because what we're at risk of at this point in time is having a digital divide of our kids and those kids who've been exposed to these capabilities. Those kids are actually quite highly skilled in these capabilities. And those kids, as a result of that, who now have this opportunity to do business anywhere in the world, make an incredible amount of money and really improve their lives a lot. And then we've got other kids who aren't exposed to that. So we're at real risk of creating and entrenching the inequality we already have in South Africa at the moment. And that's incumbent upon us as parents, upon us as society stakeholders, companies, NPOs, as government, to really bridge that gap by allowing our learners as much access to those opportunities as possible. That's a journey, but it's a journey that's urgent. It can't be a journey over 10 years. We really have to address this and tackle this within the next, I would say, 12 to 24 months. And part of Mr. Mac Learning is trying to do that. So that's the inequality piece that is very, very urgent and we've got to tackle in South Africa and across the continent. Regarding to issues of trust, as soon as you're on the internet, as soon as you're on digital platforms, part of the unspoken transaction is you are ceding some of the things that are private about you. And there is a risk that there may be a breach of trust and some of your personal details may be exposed, blah, blah, fish paste. The risk of that is very, very real. But if you look at the cost-benefit analysis, right, I would much rather use Mr. Mac Learning. I would much rather use YouTube and all these digital platforms because the benefit I extract is much greater than the risk of my data being disseminated to third parties. Or even if it is, I don't have anything really, really odious to hide that is going to be totally a train smash in my life. So the benefit of the access, the enrichment in terms of the learning, and the networks I get, the people I get to connect with, far outweigh the risks in terms of the data breaches and the trust breaches that may occur. And that's just the reality of this particular medium.
Now, Dr. Makovah, back to my point on a possible overhaul of the education system. Do you get a sense that the current education system is compliant with modern digital technologies to advance them? Or, if not, will such an incompatibility require an overhaul of the education system?
Yeah. The short answer is no.
Okay.
That's the short answer, and it's the truthful answer, and it's the correct answer. The question, the bigger question is, how do we move forward? And how do we equip our learners? How do we equip, I've got a daughter, how do we equip our children in order to be proficient, in order to be prepared for the world that they're not going to live in the future, the world that is already here? And my argument, and I've been consistent in this regard, is you need all stakeholders involved. The government cannot solve this problem on its own. The private sector cannot solve this problem on its own. Everyone has got to make a contribution. We've started our contribution with Mr. Mac Learning, our online learning platform, but everyone has got to make a contribution. And I'm going to make a very, very controversial proposition right now.
Yep.
If you had to ask a parent, if you had to say to them, here's how much the government spends on your kids, I'm just going to make up a number, 50,000 Rand per annum. Would you like us to spend that money at this school, which is a public school over here, and you'll take your child there? Or would you like us to spend that money at school B, and it's a private school over here, and you'll take your child there? And the private school has got outcomes, education outcomes, that are 50% better than the public school. A parent, any parent who loves their child, is going to take their child to the school that's got the better outcomes. And the thing I'm advocating is there's a lot of capability, there are a lot of skills within the private sector that we are not using and deploying within the public sector. So the private sector skills we're not using, which could enhance our kids' education. And we're not doing that partly because of our historical past and we've got ideological baggage, etc., etc. But that's at a high level. When you ask individual parents, if you had to give them a choice, it's very, very clear what they would do. And I've got an incredible amount of respect and admiration for the work the government is doing and what the Department of Basic Education has been doing. But with all my friends, all my colleagues there, when they can afford it, they send their kids to private schools and schools that will give their kids the best opportunities possible. The point I'm trying to make is there's a huge opportunity for us to harness all resources, public sector resources, private sector resources, really improve the education outcomes of the country and really tackle this digital opportunity. So it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity we have going forward. So we reduce these gaps between those who have and those who don't, and we really position our kids for success in the future.
And in the quest of harnessing those resources, are we better capacitated or equipped to address this disjuncture of what students are expected to learn versus what the job opportunities may be available to them?
Simpiwe, we actually know the answer to that. As educators, we speak to the private sector very, very often. They tell us we actually know the answers. We know what our problems are. We know what our problems are. What we haven't worked out as a society is to say, how do we fix it? How do we coalesce around that common goal of executing and fixing it? But we know what our challenges are. And actually, from a solution perspective, I think we know what we need to do. It's really pulling the trigger in terms of all the players that are involved, making some really, really tough decisions and prioritizing. And in the article I wrote, it's going to come out tomorrow on my LinkedIn account. It really talks to that, how we pull together for us to help our kids. We're doing it as households. So you find households will say, no, we're not going to buy that Mercedes-Benz. We're going to change the budget and direct it this way so our children have a better education. As a society, we're spending a lot of money on education. We're not getting the return that we should be getting. We know what the problems are. We've got a strong sense of what the solutions are. My argument is, at this point in time, we don't have the courage to pull the trigger, make the hard decisions, and execute on those solutions that we know, which will be painful for all of us, but do the right thing for our kids.
Dr. Makovah, I think we need another slot, to thresh out some of these issues. Thank you so much for your valuable insights on this matter.
Simpiwe, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, listeners, for listening.
Thank you so much. Well, we just spoke to education specialist Dr. David Makovah on realigning students' minds to pursuing new careers in the digital migration era.